Oh, great. Okay, so we are going live. We are live. It is Friday, May 10th. Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. I feel like we're in one of those logs where we're like all beleaguered, and this is hopefully our last entry to the log. Hopefully the last day of session. And I am offering pretty major amendment to the data privacy bill.
Which came to us last night from the house.
Which came to us last night from the House.
When did we actually get it?
I don't know.
They sent it over around. I mean,
Oh, no,
I
they-
don't know when y'all would have seen it, but they
Messaged that before they messaged how.
Oh, with their.
messaged that around
said
3 maybe.
something.
Our vote was incredible.
But- They very much narrowed the private right of action. I think they did not exempt, they exempted HIPAA, but not medical entities. Their threshold is at 100,000 consumers, for the PRA specifically, but the hospital certainly has over 100,000 consumers. So I am proposing an amendment that would keep our exemptions from the overall thrust of the data privacy bill. And so it would exempt specifically utilities and hospitals, keep Senator Lyons' language about what other medical exemptions exist. Most of our existing language that the committee has seen otherwise. John's gonna go through it, but the headline is that it would, the study would extend 2 years. I was very worried that we'd have a 6-month study and not much information next year to come back and debate the PRA again. So the study is 2 years. And the PRA itself would take effect as written unless otherwise modified in the 2026 section when we get the report back. On January 1, 2027.
Tell me a little bit more about the report.
John can tell you more about the report, and then I spoke to Senator Sears and Senator Hashim about this, and Senator Sears requested a sunset of the PRA in 2029, so that we have to take affirmative decisions on both. We would need an affirmative decision to stop the PRA from going to in effect, but we'd also need an affirmative decision to continue the PRA after seeing what happens after 2 years. So John can now walk through the amendment. And I'm saying that Senator Hashim and I are the introducers of the amendment because that's who's seen it so far. You're inviting Senator Lyon to look at it. Senator Sears has heard about it, and it can just be me and Senator Hashim, for others.
Kicks out what the House did and sent back to us 2 years. Has the study on the
2.5 years.
PRA
Mm-hmm.
and adds the medical.
Utilities and medical exemption.
Why utility?
Because they have a very strict private data privacy regime that they fall under.
By whom?
By the feds. By
And
the
why
feds.
are other people concerned about the utility?
They have, I can try to answer
Yeah.
this. They have limited privacy applications that only apply to very specific instances and are otherwise not regulated very heavily with respect to the data they handle.
Okay,
That's why people are concerned.
okay. And they have a lot of data. It's pretty much everybody has electricity.
They could, I mean, I don't know what they hold. If
Yeah.
what they hold is just what they do, then that is what's regulated. But
Right.
if they hold other things, then they're correct.
Okay.
And unless they're doing like paper checks still, they don't hold financial information.
As you know,
Why?
We passed the
Okay.
utility exemption. It
Yeah, it's
has
not-
traveled far.
All right, I was
We-
just wondering.
I know, but we don't have time to get the utilities in, so
No, that's
you can
fine.
talk to them privately.
I got information.
Yeah.
And that was better than nothing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so, morning everyone, John Gray, Legislative Council. We're talking about an amendment to H 121. This is a strike all amendment, so this does not accept what the House did. This is using what you guys passed 2 days ago, but then adding a private right of action that comes, we'll get to that, but it comes later in the future and there's gonna be a phase on it. But this is a strike all, so this is not accepting what the House.
Okay, so, and given the few changes you just talked about,
Mhm.
why are we doing a strike for such a big bill?
That is completely in John's hands with his timing.
So the reason it's a strike all is,
Probably, I mean, I have another committee member who said strike calls are preferable, so.
Oh, no, I
that
love strike
context, So
so
I don't know.
the reason
Are you
it's a
talking
strike.
about me?
Yeah,
No, I like specific amendments.
I'm the one who loves strike.
Somebody yelled at me yesterday for.
I never did yell at you, but,
Okay,
okay, I,
Senator Hartley. I don't know.
So-
Losing track.
don't worry.
So the
But
reason
just the
this
last
is,
name, last name.
You're
You're
just
getting
was
it.
curious, given we had so few changes.
Yeah, yes.
it's not you change.
There are a few changes, yeah.
The reason it's a strike all is this rejects the House concept and is a different. This is what you guys passed out 2 days ago. And then it is adding a PRA to that based on what the House did with their PRA, but it is not the same bill as what the House did.
Okay, but it includes their PRA proposal, but just kicked out to.
Exactly.
Hello, Senator Lyons. You're welcome
Come
to sit
join
there
us.
until Senator Cummings.
But it's 92 pages and we have to learn it in 50.
Not
So
yet.
this is the bill that you guys did 2 days ago.
Sit on each other's.
With changes, and the highlighting here in C reflects changes against what you did 2 days ago.
Can we now print it now that it's being printed, so. And I think if this has been an unconventional process that has really taxed John, this could have been a conference committee. And,
We were ready.
we were ready and had suggested that. This is where we are. And we are gonna do our best to help you get through it on the floor. And maybe we can break convention and give people a version with highlighting as well. But I will try to take care of that before this hits the floor. So now we're going through a highlighted strike all proposal, and John will continue.
Just to let you know, I have 14 minutes.
Okay,
And so.
let me give you the headline and then John can continue.
And to let you know, I also read the email that came from the other body that was sent to you.
I don't even know what that email is, but I will say this.
That had an explanation of what this is,
Yes, so they've narrowed the PRA
to 100,000.
to 100,000 with only when you are selling with consent, only when you have consent.
I'll talk about it.
Sean will talk about the details.
Okay, sorry.
The I talked to Senator Sears and Senator Hashim this morning. This is an amendment that would be offered by myself and Senator Hashim unless others want to sign on. That would make the study 2 years that we've tasked ADS and the AG with. I don't want to come back in 6 months and try to debate this again because we won't have enough information. The PRA would take effect January 1st, 2027. And Senator Sears asked for it to sunset on January 1st of 2029. So that we would have to take an affirmative action to stop the PRA from coming into effect, but also an affirmative action to continue it. You're welcome to sign on or something. And we kept your hospital and health.
And it's a medical, yeah, but
Put me on, and I know there's HIPAA stuff, yeah, that's good.
Yes, all your stuff should be in there. But that stuff would not be highlighted because we haven't been in a debate.
So I am going to just try to get the highlighted parts. We have an addition of the definition of data broker to the Data Privacy Act, and the reason for this is for the PRA. This is picking up our already existing definition, so nothing new here. This is being pulled in so that we can call out data brokers as one of the kind of entities that will have a PRA available against them. That's why this definition is added. The next change is page 8. This is the other addition for the extension. This is large data holds. This is a person that during the preceding calendar year processed the personal data of not fewer than 100,000 consumers. Again, this is being included with the PRA. The next change is on page 14. This is really a cleanup change. This is not meant to be substantive, but just something I noticed as I was going through the House's version yesterday. There's a clearer way to state what this third-party definition is meant to be. So this is a cleanup change to that piece. The next highlighting occurs starting at page 48. Although let's jump to, sorry, I'll call out the first enforcement section, which is on page 45. Because I think it'll make more sense to talk about this first. Okay. So this is the enforcement piece that will go into effect immediately once the act comes into effect in 2025. This would be using the underlying consumer fraud statutes, but as you see on line 14, provided that a consumer private right of action shall not apply to the violation, an AG shall have exclusive authority. So upon enactment, there is no private right of action. There's reference to the underlying consumer fraud statutes, but it's just AG enforcement. So that's what's happening upon effectiveness. Then we
Which means someone can still do a private right of action through the consumer protection,
not during the first year.
not during the first year.
So this is that house, the house is stepped down.
I'm sorry, it's actually 2 years. The private right of action wouldn't be available until January 1, 2027. So yes. Yeah. The house does not do a step down. They have the private right of action immediately against the data brokers and the large stateful.
Oh,
The step down is for the applicability.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that still in here?
So this was a new proposal yesterday to just target these data brokers and large data holders. There's no step down for that. Those are just high.
That's a-
And there's no
categories.
step down period.
In their proposal, they have a step down for the applicability thresholds generally for the act, so that's separate from the PRA, that's just who is subject to the act. They have
So is that still in there?
in theirs.
I took,
Y'all-
But not in here. Not
This,
in here.
this bill is what you guys did 2 days ago, this is not what you received from the House.
I will say, those who have been here a long time can disagree with me, but this notion that we would keep telling future legislatures what the new threshold should be and stepping something down into the future has not been a common practice. If we think the threshold is too low or too high, we can change it any year we want. But I don't see a reason to bind future legislatures to continue lowering the threshold automatically, but I see no policy reason to do that.
Yeah, it made sense to me because then the idea was that businesses would have time to adapt, which I thought was reasonable if our concern is businesses not being able to adapt.
Well, our concern is everyone, businesses, nonprofits, other
And
organizations
consumers.
and consumers, and we can decide in a future legislature if we want a lower threshold. For whatever reason.
You can also decide to not adopt it in a future year as well. So if you pass the step down, you can still
It's
stop.
in my mind something that I don't see a reason to start making a culture of telling future legislatures how to keep operating.
Unless, of course, we assume we're smarter than that future legislature would be.
Hardly think
Yeah, then that's it.
here.
Well, and term exemptions are similar to that, but I think it's not worth
Right.
having that.
So just to, for clarity here, from what the House had proposed is who is subject to the act immediately data brokers and large businesses of over 100,000. And what we're saying here is that could go into effect in 2.5 years.
They are the only ones subject to the PRA.
That's right.
At the moment.
That's what they
It's not,
passed,
right.
yeah.
And what we're doing is kicking it out 2.5 years and asking for a study. That's simplistic, but that's sort of where we are
Yes.
with this.
So we can jump down to page 48. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, just
I
I
don't
want
know.
to ask a very quick question
Yeah.
while I'm here, and that is related to the HIPAA. I know that the hybrid entity was taken out of the health,
Mhm.
the House proposal. And so is that being,
That's maintained here.
is
We
being
put it
taken
back
care
in.
You have the same exemptions you had 2 days, so the amendment that you guys passed for the healthcare
Okay.
exemptions.
Is it
maintained.
tax?
I'll try to do my best to explain on the floor, but any highlighting you see is new from what we got back from them.
I got it.
But not highlighted are the things we affirmatively chose to do.
The highlighting is what is new against what you guys passed 2 days ago. If I was highlighting what's different against what's the House sent, there would be a lot more highlighting. This isn't the House bill. I just want to,
They
I
had
want people to
very
be
few,
confused.
if not, and they had no entity level exemptions and very few
I
exemptions.
saw that, and so they were looking only at the data.
they stuck with the data level approach
Yeah.
for the House related.
Right.
That's right.
Okay. We have 7 minutes.
Yep.
Or 10 minutes, because this clock's a little fast, Jim.
This
So-
clock is leaking.
Page 48, this is exactly what we've been talking about. This is what would come into effect in January 1st, 2027. So this is your private right of action. As you can see, we strike through provided that that private right of action is not available, shall not apply, and we say the AG has exclusive authority except as provided in subsection D. And subsection D is where the private right of action is set out. And the way that reason this is structured this way is to make clear that the PRA is only available against particular actors or a specific set of violations. So that's why it's set out in this sort of narrow way. So if we jump down to page 49, subsection D, private right of action available to a consumer for violations of this chapter or rule shall be exclusively as provided under this subsection. And here's the actual body of it. A consumer
Would that be highlighted?
so the I have this section.
Oh, you have the whole section highlighted, that's fair, okay, I'll try to remember that.
If it, so
No, I don't think you could do that on the floor. I don't think you do highlight. But you're gonna have to just.
Or you can hand out highlights.
You
So-
can hand out the regular amendment and hopefully I will ask if you did a highlight amendment, because I don't wanna be set up for failure here, so.
I will say that Secretary Bloomer the other day was like, why does your document have highlighting in it? And I was like, I don't know.
It's good to be new.
Because we're human
Well,
beings.
Because my client asked me to.
Let's just see if Jenny has any other stuff before she beats it.
We're all-
No, no.
Are you good?
No, no, this is great. Thank you.
So
Thank you, Senator.
a consumer who is harmed by a data broker or large data holder, again, that's that 100,000 threshold. So who's harmed by a data broker's or large data holder's violation of subdivision 2419B2 or section 2426. So 2419B2 is processing sensitive data without consent. And section 2426 is your consumer health data protection section, which includes things like the prohibition on geofencing. So a consumer who's harmed by a data broker's or large data holder's violations of those specific sections may bring an action under the existing consumer fraud private right of action, which is contained in 2461B for the violation, but the right shall not be available for violation of any other provision of this chapter which is adopted. So it's a narrow private right of action targeted against particular harms and targeted against particular actors. That's the idea. Additionally, there's some boosting of the AG report on page 50, just to say that they should track number of actions brought, what proceeds to trial, and who are the most frequently sued violators of the act.
What's on line 17 of page 51, the small Vermont businesses, is that defined somewhere?
No, sorry, but I can jump to that now.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay, that's where we're heading next. So we're talking about the AI and Data Privacy Council, who is tasked with developing a private right of action. We boosted out what they need to come back with. I'm gonna add one piece to say that they should recommend legislative language. But giving consideration to other state approaches, including restructuring violations, so that you're targeting the
Sorry,
greatest.
where are you, John?
We are on the bottom of page 51.
Right,
Tasking that council with developing a private right of action, giving consideration to other state approaches and including restructuring violations to address the greatest harms, which is sort of what's implicit in the approach taken here. Applicability thresholds to ensure that the private right of action does not harm good faith actors or small Vermont businesses. That's not a defined term. I think we have to be technical in the sense of this development of this is tasking a council with
Because this is the goals, the overall.
Yeah, this is the
goals.
goal.
it's generally understood that small is under 20, but, and a subset under 5. But America, I mean, the United States views small as under 500, is that right? Or under,
500 employees, yeah.
or isn't it right, Megan? 500 is sort of the.
The SBA standard is,
That's all right.
small, sorry, maybe it's on for
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce, SBA standard of small businesses under 500 employees,
Right.
we've used it differently in Vermont.
We use it
for
more like
different-
20.
Yeah, and I'm
Like
fine.
50 or
Okay,
20.
I just wanna, if we got.
I wondered in the list of things that should be included here,
It's the 2025.
is an evaluation of data and information security issues relative to the act. I'm just wondering, for example, this whole business of data privacy and things that we're asking people to do. Fundamental issue that involves all of it is how well that data, consumer data, is being protected by the people who are charged with handling it, distributing it, and evaluating it. And I think there's potentially some very large holes.
So sorry, go ahead.
Just large holes that expose consumer data to theft, misuse, misappropriation, use
Absolutely.
by foreign actors and so on. And is anybody looking at that?
So
I mean,
typically,
individually, I know
Mhm.
that in many cases, say, the medical data and so on may be looked at in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure, for example, if utility data and some of those other things are used, are done now.
so they won't be under this act because you guys are exempting utilities.
Okay,
But
I mean, there are, I just use it as an example.
yeah, for sure. So but it's typically the case that people deal with disclosure kinds of risks and so data privacy and data security separately. Data security being what the issue that you're talking about.
Yes.
Part of what's unique about the comprehensive bills that have passed in sense is, while they don't have a extensively built out data security piece, there are data security provisions of this act. This tasks controllers with ensuring that they maintain data privacy regimes. I can't call out the language off the top of my head, but there actually are data security pieces of this bill, which is part of what's unique about the comprehensive approach, is that typically privacy is just privacy, security is just security. So I don't know that that's something you could add, but I will just say the act is trying to actually address that in a way that privacy acts often don't.
Well, yeah, I guess the question is they may be trying to do it, but is anybody looking to say, is there an approach that gives a degree of comfort to those of us who are passing this thing, that we haven't passed a monster that will steal all the data in the world?
So,
We want that in the report,
It's
do not worry, the data stealing month.
yeah, so
Yeah, we're trying to, I'm with fence up. We are geofencing data. We are protecting data.
Well, again, that's, as I say, that's
Yes.
one of my major worries about what we're doing here.
Like
So this
making it
doesn't,
less
this
Well,
doesn't
let's-
facilitate in any way a decrease in security. This requires more obligations of data
Let's-
In
security.
fact, I think what the Secretary of State had originally been charged with was a decrease in security. I
Which
was
was
extremely
why-
worried about that.
Which was why I think they asked for the sum of funds that they did.
I mean, what they could do is look at how government should be better handling data. Even if we don't have a PRA, we have been a big offender.
Well,
Yeah.
and the
but
real
we
issue is, do we want to,
disclose.
in effect, encourage the creation of yet another body study committee to do it, or should it be? I mean,
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
should be,
but-
like, this is ADS, so.
Yeah.
We might we could make sure to come in, that's what they did with the AI task force anyways, government focus, so. We could enshrine in here that we're ensuring they come back with. Investments we need to protect consumer data, the public
Right.
data and as government. I'm not for that.
Right, I think that's a different issue, because we already have lots of, it's disclosure requirements, and the public sector, the private sector does not have any, or very limited disclosure. So that you don't know that these data breaches are happening. I mean, that's a huge.
Do you wanna commit? We are going through it now.
Thank you.
So far, we're good. Do you wanna come in? Or do you
Thank
want
you,
me-
senators.
Okay, I'll come in the hallway. You can.
We are almost there.
Because not that we're rushing, but we are doing it, Senate Natural Resources and Energy.
Sure.
So
You're
we
good.
just need to finish, because I think we're pretty clear on the big picture here.
I will,
There are, yeah. Let's finish.
so that report with this boosted out piece on the private right of action and it language is added in the government data security piece would come back to the committees of jurisdiction on January 15th, 2026. The next changes are. I think given time constraints, we don't have to flip through the changes in the kids code section. They are mainly stylistic conforming changes to the definitions. Actually, they're entirely stylistic conforming definitional changes, so there's no substantive concern that you need to have in the kids code pieces. And just given time constraints, I don't think I can just.
Right.
So let me see if there's anything else I need to address for you
Let
guys.
me ask you a general question, is the kids code as strong as it was, as protected as it was?
So this is the same as what you guys did 2 days ago.
I know, I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what we did too, so
Uh,
I wish I did.
So what you guys did 2 days ago, and I think this is an extremely fair question, is the approach that the House took is they dealt with data privacy pieces, including for kids in the Data Privacy Act, and they dealt with enhanced protections for minors related to online products in the kids code piece. That was the approach that they took. What you guys did is kids are not subject to Data Privacy Act, period. That's what was voted on, and for data privacy, for kids code, we tried to migrate all of the data privacy protections into kids code for the kids. So you ended up with kids are treated under this law and adults are treated, I should say minors, not kids.
Yeah.
Minors are treated under kids code and adults are treated under data privacy. And so this is the same protections as you had 2 days ago for minors, but it is important to call out the applicability thresholds for kids code are very different from the Data Privacy Act, meaning that fewer businesses are actually subject to kids code. So technically, while kids are more strictly protected under kids code, fewer businesses actually have obligations with respect to kids based
Interesting,
on what
all
you
right,
guys passed to.
okay,
But that's
that's helpful. So the scope of it for kids is less.
exactly,
Okay.
it's very strict, so it's very protective in what you're calling out, but it applies to fewer businesses.
Okay. And fewer types or just numbers?
So the idea behind kids code, as I understand it, was to target sort of the biggest violators. And now all your privacy pieces for kids are in kids code.
Okay. Thanks.
Megan has a question, and I wish I didn't have to hurry us along, but we're doing several places at once. Megan.
One key point for us had been the education of businesses on what these new pieces are gonna be. I know the effective date is July 2025. And that there's not an appropriation opportunity this year for that education piece that I think the Vermont Law School Law
Right,
Clinic
that we talked
was
about,
going to do
Mhm.
exceptionally well. But if there's an opportunity, because this study is also not coming back, or the advisory group, to direct the Attorney General and ADS to start working on a
Guidance.
educational plan guidance
Yeah.
now, that would be helpful.
I tend to agree.
So I have responsive things to this.
Okay,
Su-
sure.
Super helpful. The AI council piece comes into effect 2024.
But they're doing a report that's
There's-
not due,
There's
right?
2 reports. So there's
Okay.
one, that's part of what's new here is that the private right of action report is meant to come out later. And the other report is meant to come earlier, but the actual development of education and outreach, which can start immediately, doesn't have to be tied to the report. They're being tasked with that, and it's separate from tasking that, like the House's approach has been AG being tasked with doing this. This is a different approach to have the Data Privacy Council do this, AI Data Privacy Council, but it's meant to be, but it comes into effect that they're developing public education and outreach immediately. So I hope that is helpful. I'm happy to hear. Yes.
Wendy, where are you on whether you want to sign on to this amendment?
No one has to sign on, really.
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't know enough, and I want the highest level of protection for the consumer that we can get.
Absolutely.
And I really appreciate the time to cure, that's so important. A lot of these examples, like the licorice thing, probably wouldn't have happened if there had been a time to cure. Is there still a time to cure in the
Yeah.
amendment?
So that's for the AG enforcement piece, yes.
Yeah.
That is permitted. So
There's no
AG
such thing as the time to cure with the PRA.
Well, yeah, we had the
The time to cure was always the AG. You can't choose what a court does.
No, but we had the,
There have been different approaches to the PRA. If you're using the underlying PRA, it does not have the cure period. But if you have a built-in PRA, you can include the cure period.
But an attorney can still decide to. That there is no cure, that they're not gonna wait that long, that the cure period can happen while they file a court. So
Yeah.
we do have to move on. I'm not asking anyone to sign this. I would like our vice chair to go be our emissary to the housing bill, if possible. You don't have to decide right now how you feel about it.
Okay.
And if you need to, I can.
Yeah, thank you. I would appreciate that.
Let me just ask.
Okay,
The issue that I raised, is
Yeah.
it going to be addressed in the bill, or do I have to do a separate amendment?
Let's take final amendments to the amendment now. That's what I
And I would
want to do.
appreciate waiting on this and doing it when we can be together. This.
Oh, okay, I didn't know what you're pointing at.
Yeah.
So
You got
we're gonna find a time to come back. It would be really nice to come back together as a committee one more
Yeah.
time, not discussing difficult things
And I'm gonna hear
to
Senator Ross.
celebrate, but we are gonna stay, well, I'm
I would
asking
go be
Senator
an
Cross to do that.
ambassador, which I was
But to
for.
keep a quorum long enough to give John any more guidance on changes to the amendment. And Senator Brock is, let's make sure we look at the study and what comes back to us next year. And then you are seeing the advisory council giving us ongoing advice, even when the PRA takes effect, to tell us any compromise to.
And that may be liaising
Yes.
with other organizations
Yeah.
within state government.
Right.
That way it covers, the rest of ADS and stuff.
Right.
Especially ADS, just regarding, data and information security relative to the data that's being processed or being used or being collected and being transmitted, by, as a result of this act.
Right.
As a result of this act, we're just,
So
No, not necessarily as a
Okay.
result of this act.
okay,
you're just saying you want to check in on data security practices that the government has in place, basically.
That has, that government has in effect, that it's not just data, it's not just the practices of government, it's the practice of it's the practices of handling consumer data in accordance with this act.
Yeah.
It's,
Okay.
it's the whole issue of the privacy of the data that.
You mean like, is it
that
making us
we
any
are-
safer? Like, is it making us any safer
Is
to enact
it
this?
making it, is it exposing us? What we ask people to do, is that exposing us further by the handling and transmission of it, and by the not necessarily commingling, there's really commingling.
well, they are. Yeah, doing something to it, so it's how they process it, making it worse, is
And
that,
essentially, it's, what are the implications of what we're asking people to do relative to data security?
Okay.
It's,
And
the
like,
advisory council is providing just advice of a general nature. It's not necessarily looking at each individual application or each individual's company's process. But there may be implications in terms of what we ask people to do in this act that further exposes consumers' information to theft or misuse.
right,
And that's what I think people ought to be thinking about.
which is obviously to me not the intent, that's the opposite
I know it's
of
not the intent, but-
Yeah, I just wanna make that clear.
Yeah,
No, but we should,
Let's just get the wording.
so
or unintended consequences.
Yeah.
analyzing the data security implications of implementation of the Vermont Data Privacy Act.
I think that is perfectly okay.
Okay.
Does this group have money to hire consultants?
The ADS has said they want to take this on.
No, I understand, but their function is really,
We don't, they have the
I don't
AI,
know,
well, they have the
yeah,
AI.
everybody want
advisory
AI.
council. We
But
don't have an appropriation that we
okay, they might
No.
need
in the
the
future.
authority to hire consultants.
Yes, we can talk about it in BAA next year. We don't talk about it at some other
I mean,
point,
we
but
shouldn't just.
we don't have an appropriation.
Okay, I'm just expressing a concern because
Okay,
I would like.
we
them
we have to focus on language we
The
can't
minds
change in
of
this.
people in ADS, I think, are sufficient to
Yeah.
at least take a first pass at this, of thinking about the data security implications, and then they can come back with us with a budget and to put some implementation tools in place in the future.
Yeah.
I want them thinking about it.
Oh, I hope they already have been thinking about it, I mean, that's part of their job. Good
Already
security.
told to.
Well,
I can add that.
Perfect.
I had emailed you a concern last night that was,
Site right?
yes, what, I don't know what you just said, but.
Sorry, the last, you're talking about the residual funds being distributed to,
Yeah, don't like-
so. I don't think you can really prohibit this, but let me just,
can't you say it would go into a data privacy settlement fund that we control?
so that is effectively what, so the idea behind that is that it's a limited remedy available for settlements where essentially distribution of funds doesn't make sense. Because it's such a low figure that to actually incur the cost of distributing it to folks results in $0. So this is only something that comes up in limited context where a class settlement does not make available sufficient funds to actually remedy the. And under Vermont Civil Rules of Procedure, I think it's 23G, you can of course elect not to have any residual funds. You can settle in a way that will reward people, or if there's not sufficient funds, you're in the scenario where the judge has to ask, well, what do we do with these funds? So this is a limited context that applies to, and what courts have come up over hundreds of years with doing is trying to find a way of providing indirect benefits to consumers. They try to find a solution that actually does reward them in a way. So that's why.
Did we write that it can't go to organizations that advocate?
You could, I could try to think of something,
I am
The-
conscious of not triggering this bill going to another committee.
the thing I would say is that for the settlement to happen,
Mhm.
the plaintiffs have to approve the settlement. So plaintiffs have to agree that they're fine with the funds going to whoever it goes to, they have a choice. And
Well, the
then
plaintiffs are often attorneys.
so the attorneys bring the suit on
Yeah.
behalf of them. And then the attorneys acting on behalf of the consumers have to agree to the settlement, and then.
I'll just say I'm not okay with this practice, but I don't think we can solve it right now, and I'd like
Agree
to
with
come
that.
back next
Yes.
year and work on that. I'd like us to have a settlement fund where the money's deposited
I
and
think that's-
distributed by.
That makes sense if you're in a
By
situation.
Vermont entity, but if that will trigger it going to appropriations, so we won't do that right now. Probably a finance too.
The-
Um,
The second piece I just want to say is both, there has to be approval from the plaintiffs and then the court has to accept the settlement. So the court can say, actually, this isn't consistent with the intention of the settlement, so it can't go to these routes.
okay, so you have some changes to make, we
Yep.
should get to natural resources. Thank you, John, very much. I expressed to Chair Marcotte that we will do better by you, should you continue to be here in the future, and we didn't destroy your love of government. So, thank you really sincerely, John,